a contemporary, indigenous perspective on things. There is a web of light spreading across the earth. It is spiraling out of the darkness that has kept humankind within their self-imposed prison of limited thought. As a human race, we have reached a precipice where many of the old paradigms that have kept us separated from one another and limited our thoughts and spirits for a millennium are falling away before our eyes. The gathering of the eagles, unity of the tribes, Loomi Island, Washington, USA, summer of 1995. To many of the native people who live in the Pacific Northwest, salmon is the staple of life. Much of their culture has been built around salmon fishing for generations. One could say that to them the salmon is what the buffalo was to the Plains people, very sacred. I once heard an old-timer tell a story of how at the turn of the century, the great salmon runs in the Pacific coastal waterways were so plentiful that one could literally grab the salmon up out of the rivers with their hands while the salmon were on their way to the spawning grounds. The people could fill their needs with winter meat in less than an hour. The 20th century has brought with it many changes to our way of looking at life upon our planet. In less than 100 years, automobiles have replaced the horse as the mode of transportation for most people throughout our global societies. As late as World War II, 50% of the world still relied on the horse as its main mode of transportation. That's food for thought. Where do you think the term horsepower came from? Grandpa grew up in a world where he could hope for a letter from New York to California in perhaps 10 days, 7 days by train, and then another 2 or 3 days by Pony Express. Today, we can send an email to thousands of people around the globe in a few seconds. I am like a bridge between generations, depicting a page of life that, for most, has gone the way of the buffalo and a visionary of that which is to come. I have become sort of an enigma throughout a lot of the American West, never knowing which of my skills will be called upon. Will Creator ask of me this day to use my gifts as a ceremonial leader, mountain man, tracker, artist, author, musician, healer, dreamer, or explorer? Perhaps today as the wizard. My soul dictates that I have a need to spend part of my time in the pristine desert mountain wilderness until the call comes to be with the magic of the ocean, with the dolphins and the whales. My life, it seems, has become one big medicine journey. I find myself traveling from Mexico up through Canada and even an occasional trip to Alaska. While I consider the Southwest my home, I have also lived in the islands off Washington, part-time for nearly 7 years. He's probably talking about the San Juan Islands in Washington State. I have many friends who live all along the Pacific, both on islands and on the high pine and madrona-covered cliffs that overlook them. We all sail and fish the waterways from the Oregon coast to Alaska. I have a deep love and respect for the gentle people who call themselves natives there. In fulfilling my service as a ceremonial leader, I have participated in countless ceremonies with the people who live along the waterways from the coast of the island rivers of Canada. And for the most part, they are naturally spiritual people and possess an intimate and sensitive relationship with the sea and her creatures. I have come to know the rhythms of life there as I have danced through the drama of the human experience with them. I have listened to their stories of how they once had many fishing boats, and even with their fleets, they could not fill the demand for fish at the market. Now they find themselves struggling in their lives to create an alternative way of surviving as they face the reality that the once great fishing industry has all but disappeared from this plain. I have come to recognize that the malaise in their eyes as they witness the passing of a way of life that is gone forever. I know this from their stories about how, over the last 40 years, they watched the great salmon runs being harvested along the Pacific coast by giant tankers that drop nets as long as 36 miles. That is almost as long as the Santa Margarita River in Southern California. I'm chiming in. I was reading Ghost Wolf's words. But if that's how long their nets were, wow. Wow. So I'll repeat that. I know this from their stories about how over the last 40 years, they watched the great salmon runs being harvested along the Pacific coast by giant tankers that drop nets as long as 36 miles. As we approach the millennium, the numbers of salmon in our rivers and lakes have dwindled to almost nothing. I have heard that amongst the river people, in some cases, the salmon have not been seen heading for their spawning grounds for several years now. In 1992, under the direction of then spiritual leader Joe Washington, the Lumi people began to hold their blessings of the salmon ceremonies. I was asked to bring my chanupa, or sacred pipe, and lead the people in prayer for the return of the salmon to the rivers. Even after the passing of the Native American Religious Freedom Act by Congress in 1978, this ceremony had not been allowed under the laws of the state of Washington. After many generations of not being able to practice their spiritual ways, the Lumi people themselves had almost completely forgotten the ceremony. Only a small handful of people who continued to hold the ceremony in secret remembered. Some underground shit right there. That's kind of a guttural, hysterical giggle. I must release. Oh. This has been the story with many of the traditional ways of the tribes, forced to live under governmental reservation policies. Poppycock policy bullshit. Pardonnez-moi. The practice of their ways, even the speaking of their own native language, was forbidden and against the law. The punishments for breaking these laws were severe. Often, parents had their children taken away, and they themselves were thrown into prison camps. This may be hard for you to believe since you have been taught that you live in a civilized and free society. But I have seen it with my own eyes and know that it is the truth, even today. On a rainy morning in 1992, on the shores of Lumi Island, over 1,000 people gathered. There were Lakota, Nambi, Omaha, I'm gonna try to say this, Haudenosaunee, Shuswap, Weedrick, Apache, Cherokee, Hopi, Cheyenne, Nez Perce, Athabascan, Swinomish, Mayan, Americans, Canadians, Liberians, Chinese, to mention a few. They all joined along with the Lumi High Elder Joe Washington and the chiefs and spiritual elders of 5 nations. I gathered with the circle of spiritual elders and had the privilege to lead the people in prayer at the first salmon ceremony to be held in over 80 years. The following is a transcript of my talk at that gathering, which I will read in another video. I just want to share with whoever comes across this. I was visiting, it was 2015, a while back. And I was visiting a friend in Auburn, Washington. And he was managing a grocery store. And since he was gone all day, I got to, roam around on foot, Auburn. And there was this little used bookstore that was calling me. I love books. And I, took a gander around the bookstore, and it was almost like the book was speaking to me. Not the book I'm reading from, but Winds of Change Manuscript by Robert Ghostwolf, who also wrote this that I'm reading from now, which is an author's manuscript titled Last Cry, Native American Prophecies and Tales of the End Times. So I feel, little did I know then what I know now. Of course, it's always like that I was called to read and share Robert Ghostwolf's manuscripts. And now that's very clear to me. It definitely wasn't even a few months ago. It was, but it wasn't. Now it truly is. There is no veil. The veil's gone. We've been checked on how we're living. So, and I say we because we're all in this boat, humanity, we together. And a rising tide truly does raise all ships. So, I'm gonna make peace with the Matrix, but check out of that shit. Oh, I cussed. Try not to, but I potty mouth sometimes. Anywho, I just thought I would share that, how I came across the initial Winds of Change manuscript, which was on a bookshelf. I got a couple other books that day. One was Edgar Cayce's The Complete 4 books on prophecy. And the other was a Salvador Dali art book. And I think the other one was another Edgar Cayce book on past reincarnations. It's on my bookshelf, so titled Reincarnation. Fun facts. All right, much love, all, and as always, aho.